Hi, everybody. I'm Adam C. from North Carolina. I'm a compulsive eater. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day off the gray sheet. I write it down. I fall into my sponsor. I don't eat in between meals no matter what. And abstinence is the most important thing in my life. My abstinence date is November 21st, 2021. And I'm grateful to be here with you. And I haven't been to this meeting in a while and I miss it. And I was thinking a lot about, since my anniversary passed 2 days ago about this meeting and qualifying at this meeting. During my struggles with compulsive eating, coming to this meeting, the title of it really penetrated even before I read anything from the big book. Just those words, sunlight of the spirit, just are so powerful. And I was thinking about when I did my first AWOL and then my second AWOL. And well, one was a mini AWOL, but think that's number one. Okay. Thinking about what that means, sunlight of the spirit, and learning about how your resentments and your fear and your anger are like a large skyscraper that's casting a shadow between you and God, and you and your higher power, and you and your recovery. And all you have to do is step a foot away from that large shadow and luxuriate in the sunlight and the recovery. But you don't realize it when you're in the misery, how close you are to recovery. So I'm very grateful to be in recovery and not in the shadow. So back to what it was like. Childhood was a complex and painful, even torture relationship with food. I remember the Garanimals, the Husky section in J.C. Penney, going there with my mom. And she took me there not to torment me, not to emphasize that I was overweight and that I was struggling with body image. She went there for the opposite reason. She wanted me to be comfortable in my own skin and to enjoy my body and not hate it. Unfortunately, that's on number two. Unfortunately, she bought me corduroys, and I didn't realize until I put them on with my thighs rubbing together that they would announce my entry and exit into a room like a fire siren. And that sensation of horrible self-pity and self-hatred and embarrassment still rings in my ears 40 years later. There was an overweight teenager that lived down the street. She was our babysitter, and she would raid our refrigerator and make mountains of food in our toaster oven. I know it's hard to believe. Well, maybe not. We didn't have a microwave. Our quick cooking technique was the toaster oven. It was novel at the time. But she would make these heaps of technically abstinent food, well, partially, and share it with us. And I never thought about that experience until the women in our program talked about being that babysitter. I completely blocked out that experience and how that experience fed my addiction, fed even back then, introduced me to what it was like to compulsively eat and to stuff my face with food. And what else? I remember a Jewish day camp that I went to, and I always mention the name because someday someone else from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania will have been there and we'll be able to reminisce. So it was called Green Hills Swim Club in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We would go to the Jewish Community Center in the morning, and every afternoon as a
That's five F.
thanks, Karen, as a treat, quote unquote, they would take us to Green Hills Swim Club. But being 50 pounds overweight, there was nothing as a treat. Actually, there was a treat because I would spend the day at the snack bar and I could picture in my mind's eye the snack bar. I didn't know that I was the connection between my overeating and the appearance of my body and the carrying around that extra weight and the self-hatred. But in my mind's eye, I can picture the male. He must have been in his 20s probably, or maybe in his late teens. The male counselor in his Speedo and his six pack, flirting with the female counselors and desperately wanting to be him and wanting to look like him, but also act like him and be as comfortable in social situations as he was. But instead, standing there, they didn't have swim. I know men can wear swim shirts now. Well, it was socially unacceptable to wear swim shirts. So all I could do was cover my body with my arms. So Boy Scouts was overall a very positive force for me in my life. The focus on camaraderie, wilderness survival, group dynamics, cooperation. It was truly a wonderful experience. But there was a dark side, and not the dark side that has been in the news over the past decade. The dark side was compulsive eating. And again, as I'm sure all your memories are from your childhood, in my mind's eye, I can picture the Christmas potluck, and we would all bring in food, mountains of food, and we were urged to compulsively eat until we were bursting. And it again fed that compulsive eating in me. And the campouts, which you would have to go to of meetings during the week and the month to earn the honor of going to the the camping trips, which were maybe every month. But the camping trips were maybe not for everyone, but for me, were about compulsive eating. It was very food centric because making food over a campfire takes a lot of effort, takes most of the day, and we reveled in it. And again, it fed that compulsive eating in me. So, there's Karen. Oh, I see. All right. I think I'm going to just mention one more story of misery and then move on to recovery. The first time I experienced any level of recovery was when I was 16. I discovered a doctor-led book on food, and it was very similar to our diet. It was mostly vegetables. You could eat legumes, but other than that, that combined with a Jane Fonda VHS tape that I did with my dad, I was able to get to a normal weight during late high school. And I liken it to Gray Sheet because my community, my connection was with my mom and dad. They never pushed me, but they received me when I was ready to reach out for help. So my dad and I would do the aerobics, and Jane Fonda had those, I think they're called leg warmers, knee-high leg warmers. I can still picture them because it's really funny, like what we wore in the 80s. And I was able to get to a normal weight. And I kept that weight off until mid-college when a lot of people talk about the over drinking, binge drinking, late night food truck trips. I ballooned up again. And I somehow was able to lose the weight again. And
10 minutes.
that's 5 minutes. Thank you. I, out of desperation, went to an hour bound trip. I was 23 and I was about 60 to 80 pounds overweight. And I signed up for this hour bound trip. It was a 3 week trip in Utah and Colorado. We were supposed to hike and plan for the 3 months before, build up our endurance. And I think I remember starting that and then after a week giving up, just like I'd started dozens of diets. So I arrived in Colorado. I can't remember where it started. No, in Utah. I arrived in Utah about 80 pounds overweight. They gave me an 80-pound backpack and we started hiking. By the end of the first day, my thighs were rubbed raw and bleeding, but I was too embarrassed to tell anyone. And I was desperate. I snuck into the first aid kit and I taped my thighs apart. We were in the middle of the wilderness, uh, probably several days hike out to the closest road. That tape there was able to it made me able to complete the program, but I had to remove it at the end of 3 weeks. I tried to soak it off in the Motel 6, but I couldn't. So I eventually tore it off. Somehow survived that. But that misery and that self-hatred stays with me and reminds me how deep the misery can be with compulsive eating. And other than, I'm not even sure if I've told my wife about that specific experience. I've told my wife and daughters about some of that experience on that trip. So what happened? De Decades of yo-yo dieting, uh, trying every diet that all of you have talked about, detracting my misery and my weight, detracting from enjoyment of my wedding because it was a joyful experience, but it wasn't as joyful as it could have been. I didn't know that the rental shoes, I don't know why I rented shoes, but they had those crepe soles. And, standing 60 pounds overweight or 80 pounds, I'm not even sure how much. By the end of the day, all I could think about was my aching feet. And it detracted from the joy that I did experience at my wedding. Years of hiding from cameras, always being exhausted, dark clothing, heavy clothing that made things even worse. I remember discovering the swim shirt when it became acceptable for men to wear swim shirts. So how did I discover Gray Sheet? Well, my sister is in AA, our parent program. And so she knows a lot of people in Gray Sheet. And she talked to me, she mentioned it. It took me about 6 months to, oh, I have a minute left. How can I finish with the last minute? Oh boy. Well, maybe I'll just tell you about what keeps me abstinent. The 90-90 really helped. 90 meetings in 90 days. Because meeting makers really do make it. I call my sponsor as much as possible. Sometimes we do text, but speaking to her, even for just a few minutes, gives me the connection I need with the program and the support that prevents me and is a uh, protection against the first bite. 20 seconds, what to do. I make no independent food choices. The peace, surrender, and honesty, which I feel I'm very grateful for. And there is a fence around our food, and that's what keeps us abstinent. But within that fence is a carnival. And I'm quoting someone, but I can't remember who. So thank you so much. And I'm very grateful to be here with you.